All right, so let's start with the Titan first. Basically, I don't have every exotic here strictly because we all know the absolute dog water exotics. Basically, a list of exotics that I felt most people use. If you guys see any missing that you want me to add, we can add them real quick. But I feel like I did a pretty good job covering them, at least in terms of like what's used in like raids, GMs, that sort of thing. Honestly, I feel like an easy one to start with, D tier. Even though a lot of people use them in general content, Lion Rampants you're not using in GMs. For general movement, they're nice. You use them in raids and shit and like casual gameplay, but Lions, nah. They're D tier. I would say if Dunes actually worked properly and they weren't bugged right now, that Dunes would be C tier, but I actually might put Dunes down D tier as well. Especially like in a GM, like you might get some kills with chaining, but for the most part, I don't know. Okay, so those two I felt like were obvious. This is where it gets a little more niche. So Actium Warrig, I feel like personally is C tier only because you can use it with Xenophage, and that's the only reason why. Maybe B, but I feel like it's so situational. So this is one of those exotics that I was talking about where basically you get no value out of it. Like in a Nightfall where it's actually, you're actually pressed to play your life. In one like Lake of Shadows, for example, you could run this all day long. But in the more difficult ones like Scarlet Keeps, the Guarding Worlds, you name it, Exodus Crash, for example, you're never using this exotic. Armamentarium, I don't know, dude. This one's tough. I'm tempted to go B with it because grenades and GMs often are very, very strong. So like last season, if you were using it with last season's artifact with like double stasis grenades and overload nades, especially with how long the cooldown is on those, this is really valuable, like very, very valuable. I don't know. I don't know if that's enough to bring it up to B tier for me because there's a couple B tier exotics that affect like what you do more often, but it applies to every class. Okay, I'm gonna leave this in B for now, but I'll probably end up moving it because the next one for me is Hollow Fireheart, which right now in the GM meta might actually be D tier, even though it's a very strong exotic. Hammers just aren't meta, which sucks. So by default, it gets knocked down to D tier, which is too bad because it's actually, in terms of like just natural gameplay and like passive benefits that you get from Hollow Fireheart, it's actually really good. But when I compare it to something like Phoenix Cradle, that's what I would run on Solar. What are you guys thinking with Phoenix Cradle? For me, I think it's B only because hammers aren't used. Bottom tree hammers with sunspots, and these are actually so fucking OP, but no one ever uses them simply because it's not GM meta. This is one I wasn't sure where to place it, and I have no idea what to do with it. What do you guys think about Precious Scars? I'm putting this here because I don't know where to put it. We'll figure out where to grab it. Fat D. I've literally never used it. Meh. D plus, C minus, F minus. Is it that bad? I was thinking it would probably be like C or D tier, but I didn't realize it was that bad. Because I honestly, this is the class I know the least about and that I have the least experience with in GMs. It's worse than Hollowfire in my opinion. Really? Wow. Okay, so we'll go D tier then. That's actually crazy. I didn't realize it was that bad. It's like a bubble melee overshit. That's it? Dude, imagine if they buffed it to be consistent healing like a well. Heart of Inmost Light. I think I'm going to put this B tier as well, strictly because it works with every single subclass. And if you're running Stasis, it's very, very strong. Dude, a lot of this comes down for Titans is just some of them are so good that it makes the others useless. I'll put this in C tier because the exotic itself is actually good. Aeons, I'm going to put A tier. I don't know though. Actually, for Titan, this might be a hot take, but I might actually put these B tier as well. Strictly because if you're running Bubble or Center Shield, you're running Ursa's. If you're not running that subclass, you're running Thunder Crash. You're never going to put your ammo generator on your Titan. So for me, I feel like it would be a waste for your Titan to be running Aeons, even though it's a good exotic. This is where it gets tough. I'm going to start with Helm of Same 14. I'm going to put it A. It's very good in close range encounter GMs where shit's really hectic and you need to stay alive. This would be better if champions were blindable, which as far as I'm aware, they are not. However, if you're still in a room with a lot of enemies that do huge damage to you, so like servitors who are making a bunch of shit immune, if they go in there and they're blinded, that's huge for you. So a really well-timed bubble pop and the overshield you get outside of it is really strong. Curus of the Falling Star. I'm really mixed on this one, I'm not gonna lie. I'm capping. I think, honestly, I know people are super hyped up about this exotic. I think it's like B+. I don't think it's S tier galaxy at all. I'll be interested to see how much damage Curious actually does in a GM environment when you're actually locked and you're not gonna straight nuke a champion. Honestly, I might put this B tier as much as it pains me. Oh man, I don't know, dude. That makes me want to shift other stuff down though. Here's the thing. So like this season, I could see it being A because you can pair it with the overload arc grenades, which actually gets value of Thunder Crash more. And it can clear like big waves of ads. Like I could actually see it being very, very good in Fallen Saber. Like you could easily do huge damage to a champion and take out a whole wave coming down from the skiff, like when you're capturing the point. I could see it taking out a huge amount of ads from the room in the aftershock, killing a bunch of shit if it continues to push you. If you go in at the right timing, like right as you stun overload champions, you'll probably do over half the damage to both of them, making the cleanup a lot easier. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be that good in GMs. I think I might go B tier. Are we in agreement to move Armamentarium down to C? Honestly, I might go this way. I might keep Phoenix Cradles here because both of these, Curious and Phoenix Cradles, could both be very useful if you're going for like an ad clear champion melting super. Like these honestly could accomplish the same thing, and you could probably do similar stuff with Phoenix Cradles from a safer distance. If this doesn't show you guys how pinholed Titans are into top tier exotics, I mean, like, I don't know what else will. It's sad. Honestly, it's sad. But if you pick your fire team for GMs, you would want a Titan. I feel like Double Hunter or Warlock is probably the go-to. Agreed, Bionic, until Ursa's come in. Ursas are S tier, if not S plus tier, if not Z tier. This is probably the best exotic in Destiny 2 for GMs, like straight up. It's better than Phoenix. I think in terms of like an exotic that can get you out of situations and bail you out of stuff that you shouldn't be able to survive in terms of like your fire team wiping. I mean, you're literally immune to damage in an Ursa banner shield for what, like 15-20 seconds? And on top of that, your teammates get a bonus to weapon damage equivalent to bubble when they're behind you, and when they're behind you it lasts longer, and it generates a disgusting amount of orbs, and you get super back from it. It has no downsides. You get safety, you get mobile safety, you get super energy regen, like, to be honest, to an extent that like I'm surprised it hasn't been nerfed, similar to how Skull of Dire Amkara or Orpheus rigs were nerfed. How has this not been addressed yet? And I'm not calling for nerfs, but like, holy shit. In a GM environment, they're actually broken. If you guys haven't used them before, the amount of damage you take, whatever damage value scale they use in GMs, it takes literally about 5 bullets from a basic ad and you have 50% of your super back. Maybe this is a very hot take, but I honestly would prefer to see them nerfed instead of seeing the exotic tier list look the way that this does right now. Anyway, I think this is the exotic tier list for Titans. Basically, we started with like what I thought was like generally considered to be decent or like widely used, or at least somewhat common for Titans. At the top, you have Phoenix Cradles, Curious, Helm of St. 14, and Ursa's to cap it off. So moving over to Warlock. This was number 2. To start, yeah, basically I think Aeons. God, dude, that's so tough actually. I think Aeons on a Warlock are going to be B tier, strictly because I think you're going to use them on a Hunter more than you are a Warlock. They're still really good. I think the only perk you're going to use is Sect of Insight, and even then, even though it's free special and heavy if you're finishing champs or majors, which is really good, it's only for your fire team members and not you. So you'd need to play a pure support class, which I personally would equate to something like Phoenix. Personally, like if you were going to run that role, but you would have to run a secondary role like something like Stasis and then this. But if I was going to run Stasis, I would prefer to run Hunter. Revisit it after you fill it in. Yeah, for sure. Controverse, I'm going to put A tier. I think in terms of the exotic themselves, they're very, very strong, especially like the season. I know this is like very dependent on the artifact mods, but when we had Oppressive Darkness and Void Overload grenades, these were so disgusting. I didn't run well almost the entire season. This was like pretty much exclusively what I ran. Just generally, like Nova Bomb is still a very good pick for both ad clear and just baking champs. So it's not a bad option to run as a third. Like if you're looking for just burst damage, like obviously you can run Geomags. They're very good as well. But I think Controverse in general are just very strong. What do you guys think? Maybe B tier then? Personally, I think they're a better exotic than Aeons, but I'm also, dude, I am running off of the fond memories of Oppressive Darkness with Overload nades, so I don't know. I'm mixed. The majority of you guys are saying A. Like, let's see. How many people said A? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you have 3 people saying B. So technically right now as a community, you're voting for A. So I'm going to leave these A tier for now. This is my personal opinion. I think they're A tier. Can we get Crown over with and say C or D? I was going to say, honestly, D tier. Fuck, I don't know, dude. I'm going to say D tier just because you're never using Stormcaller in GMs. It's a good exotic for like casual strikes because it just lasts forever, but Stormcaller just needs a buff across the board in my opinion. So for Dawn Chorus, I think it has more potential than Crown of Tempest. Like if you're gonna do an ad clear super, it's decent, and then it can double play as a DPS super as well because of Igniting Touch. So the DPS is actually very good on this helmet over time. Or like the total damage, excuse me, is very, very good over time. I think overall, this helmet's actually really good. I'm going to say Phoenix. I think we all know why. I have another world. I'm going to put it on A tier. Strictly because if you're running Stasis on a Warlock, this is like the go-to exotic. I think personally, yeah, I think Stasis with this helmet is A tier. Especially because Warlock is really good for ad clear still. Like even though the super's not as good, the total ad clear is really good. The healing is still really good on like just a normal healing rift. And then you have Dustfield Grenades too. So in terms of uptime, this is really, really solid. Lunas, I'm going to put C tier. They're not bad. They're just not meta. I'm pretty much never going to use them in GMs, but the exotic is still useful in general. And if you had an up close boss where you could double slug or something like that, or you were using a legendary sniper rifle, they wouldn't be terrible. I'm almost tempted to put them D tier though, just because there's almost no point to using them in GMs personally. What do you guys think about Luna's, chat? D tier? I think so too. Good exotic. Used to be the best exotic in the game. It was the only thing you would run. If auto loading was still a thing, they would still be like S tier, but they fell all the way down to D tier, especially in GMs. Battle Harmony, I don't know. I'm tempted to put Battle Harmony A tier, but I might go with I might put it B tier. A, because you can't use it with Stasis. The super gains are really, really nice. And if you use something like ability generating like weapons and things like that, or Thresh, like a Thresh rolled weapon, but you really have to spec into it to make it super strong. I think it's better than Dawn Chorus because you can use it in more situations across more subclasses than Dawn Chorus, but I still don't see myself using it. And once we get Stasis, it might move up to A because getting like the Warlock super over and over again would be really strong, but yeah. Until then, Nezarec Sin. I'm really tempted to put this A as well. Nez Sin is actually pretty nuts. What do you guys think, chat? B for Sin and GM, S to A tier for general play. I could see B. So you guys are saying that you genuinely believe that I Have Another World is better than Nezarec Sin. I just want to clarify. I think Nez is B just because it requires Void to get most out of it, whereas I is better because it's just flat out plus 30 to ability. I agree. Transversives, I would put C tier if you wanted to be selfish. They're still a really good exotic for just general uptime. If you're speedrunning a farmable Nightfall, they're better than Lunas or Crown, but I wouldn't put them above the other ones. So I would say C, maybe B, but they're a very selfish exotic. I would never use them in GMs personally. Transies are D tier for GMs. I think they're C. I still think they're more useful than Lunas and Crown of Tempest. What are you guys thinking with Verity's Brow, chat? Verity's Brow. Y'all argued to have this one put on the list. I'm curious to see where you guys think. Verity's is B or A? B, same tier as Neza. A tier, B or A, B. B or A. Don't even know what it does. Good thing we can go to light.gg. Energy weapon kills grant death throws, which provide a bonus to the damage of your grenade and grants you grenade energy. When you have death throws and throw a grenade, nearby allies gain greatly increased grenade regen for a short time. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty damn good. I personally think it's probably B tier. Same level as I Have Another World in your opinion. Y'all think it's A tier? I don't know, dude. Like, if I'm running Nova Bomb, I'm running Controverse. If I'm running Stasis, I'm running I Have Another World, which kind of leaves Verity's Brow in a weird spot. Put that below Aeons. I think it's probably B. 9-7 vote B tier. Okay, so Verity's Brow is going to stay in B. Definitely a good exotic. Okay, so the last two we have got Phoenix Protocol and Geomags. Geos are going to go S tier. Geos are absolutely insane. Basically, I don't really need to explain anything, but like we used these in Broodhold last season. So overpowered. This season you have Overload Arc Grenades, which makes it even better. If you're looking for kind of a flex player where you have a banner shield, you have a well, I think your go-to flex player, even more than a Nova with Controverse, is going to be Geomags on Chaos Reach, simply because of how often you're able to generate ammo. This is going to be your special ammo finisher, which is honestly one of the reasons why Aeons got moved down to B, is because the amount of super regen you get on that top 25%, you basically finish for a third of your super. You have to make up about 11% difference in your super bar, which if you're running 100 intellect takes virtually no time. And then you're already topping off again. You can special finish again, top up your super again. It's just insane for ammo, ad clear, boss DPS. It does everything well. It's kind of like, it's very similar to Ursa's. Like, it has no downsides other than, like, you know, obviously if grounded's on, it can be a little bit of a yikes. You have to be careful where you use it, but for the most part, they're disgusting. And then Phoenix, obviously S tier. I think everybody knows that. I still think both of these fall behind Ursa's though. I still think Ursa's is the best exotic in the game, simply because of how many bad situations it can get you out of. So far, we've been able to conclude Titans generally are pretty limited and kind of pinholed into a couple subclasses and exotics, especially in the GM playlist. Warlocks are more generally, they have a bit more freedom. Stasis, you can use I Have Another World. Nova Bomb, you can use Controverse. Phoenix on Well, obviously. Geomags on Chaos Reach. You can use Nezsin. I mean, like, there's definitely more viable exotics and options on Warlock than there is on Titan. Typically, you're pretty much locked to one Phoenix and then one either Nova Bomb, Stasis, or Chaos Reach. If Frosties aren't S, I disagree. We'll have to see. All right, so I didn't include as many in the Hunter tier list because there are, I would say, Hunter's interesting because there are a lot of really viable exotics. There's also some that are completely irrelevant, so I didn't even include them, which made the overall list smaller than the other ones, if that makes sense. Starting off, I'm going to put Orpheus Rigs B tier, strictly because Top Tree Tether is not used hardly ever anymore. That doesn't mean this is a bad exotic, nor does it mean Tether is a bad exotic. It's just outshined by other things. I still think it's good, but I think it's B at best. It does its job well. It regens super, but they were nerfed. If they were the OG rigs, and if you know, you know, they were fucking god tier. I would have put them S before, but since they're nerf and they cap it usually around 35% super, they're B tier for me. Assassin's Cowl. This one I'm very, very mixed on. I'm debating between S and A tier because the thing is, Assassin's Cowl is extremely viable on something like Golden Gun, but if you're running Golden Gun, you're probably running Nighthawk, but it's also insanely good on Stasis, but then you're also competing with Aeons on Stasis as well. I personally think Assassin's Cowl is probably A tier, and I would put that, and I'm gonna talk about both of these simultaneously. I would put Aeon Safe there as well. I would put them both A tier, I think, because they're not essential and you have the option to flex both. But I think there are two exotics that dominate PvE more than these two, personally. I think they're both A tier. This list, I'm just going to say right now, is going to be very top heavy, because a lot of Hunter exotics are very good. All right, so if you're playing an aggressive GM, and I mean, obviously it's good whenever, but for those of you who have not seen, and I may actually pull up the video because a lot of people have not seen the video. So yeah, basically Div with Nighthawk keeps you at practice makes perfect ×5, which boosts your super bar constantly. It's similar to like a Geomag level increase. Like it'll jump huge increments at a time just because you're using Divinity. So if your Divinity player is a Nighthawk, not only do you have insane DPS, you also have someone who's going to generate special ammo for you, which I personally think is better than something like, I mean, like forcing yourself to use Aeons or even using Assassin's Cowl and like being able to finish. If you can play aggressive and you time your finishes properly and you're not going in to finish at a dumb time, Nighthawk's going to be the play 100%. I think it's S tier, absolutely. This one might surprise people. Frosties. You guys never see this used, but to me, this is the I Have Another World of the Hunter. I think if I'm running Stasis, I'm probably running Frosties, because the biggest downside of Stasis in PvE is how long ability regen time is, and Frosties literally negates about 50% of that. So if you guys have not used Frosties on stasis, they're insane, like straight up. Assassin's Cowl should go S in my opinion. It's right up there, dude. It's really close. I'm actually tempted to. We'll see where the list shakes out. So like if you guys run Stasis Hunter, which by the way is the best stasis subclass for PvE, like if you're talking about ad control, Stasis Hunter with Frosties, you have your nade up all the time. Shurikens are busted. You can use your Gambler's Dodge to get another Shuriken back, and you can sprint around to make all of that happen and get a lot of those abilities back as well. That's why I think Frosties are so strong. And a lot of people don't think about how long the downtime is on abilities with stasis, but this negates it. Last season, people didn't realize how good these were simply because, I mean, you just had mods in the artifact that kind of negated their use, right? Like you got your grenade back in full with Surge Eater, right? So this exotic is more useful this season than it was last season. You guys think Aeons or A or S? I personally think they're A, because I honestly, the meta currently in a lot of GMs is Izzy and Div, especially with how many of this season are Overload. So special finisher on something like Nighthawk is like so free where you don't really need Aeons. That's just me though. Stompies, I'm gonna put D tier for GMs. I only included this because they're the most used hunter exotic in general play. So D tier, don't really need to explain it. They don't do anything. Selfish exotic, very similar to transversives, but you don't get the reload perk that transversives offer. So selfish exotic, you're not gonna be jumping a lot of times grounded's on. Wormhusk, I'm gonna put Wormhusk B tier, because if it was OG Wormhusk, it would be A or S. I personally think it's B tier. Typically, if you're in a situation where you're close enough that you have to dodge out of the way to heal yourself, you're usually in a pretty shitty situation, and it's only about a half of your health bar, so it'll get you out of critical, but it will not restore shields. It's good, but in GMs, you lose health so fast, it's not going to save you most of the time. And it's selfish, exactly. It might be C tier. What do you guys think, B or C? The majority of you are saying C. Only because of the selfish ability. It's not that it's bad. Okay, I think that's fair. I think C is fair. Dragon Shadow. This one's actually interesting. Dragon Shadow is actually pretty cracked. It depends on what you're using. I don't think it's D tier. I don't think it's as useless as Stompies. I think I'd put it C tier because it depends on the weapon loadout that you're using. If you're using Nagi, you're never running Dragon Shadow because you're not loading single rounds. But if you're running something like Salvager's Salvo and SMG and Anarchy, for example, or Xenophage, for example, having all of your weapons reload and then having all of your handling, mobility, and all of those stats added intrinsically is helpful. It's on a similar level to Wormhusk for me, but again, it's like a very selfish exotic. It's not that it's bad, it's just there are way better options. Bakris. This is gonna ruffle some feathers for sure, because I saw some people in chat that were some Bakris stands. I'm gonna put Bakris B tier. I don't think it's that good of an exotic. I think Bakris is decent simply because, just hear me out, I know you guys are upset, but number one, 10% is not that significant of a damage buff. Number two, yes, it emulates the perks of a dodge, right? So like if you have Gambler's Dodge on and you teleport out, it can save you in situations where you might be in trouble. Survivability for sure is a good thing, and the damage boost is good, but you're also limited to using Anarchy, and not every GM is Anarchy based. I think it's B tier. It's not that it's bad. It's definitely a solid pick, but other exotics outshine it in similar areas. I don't think you can rank one without the other. They're going to be back to back. We'll start with Omnioculus. That seems to be the biggest consensus answer. Omnioculus is S tier. I don't think that's a shock to anybody. So for those of you who don't know, you get 2 smoke bombs, which basically is the end result of what you hope to achieve with 6 Coyote, is getting a second smoke bomb, right? However, the 2 smokes are also dependent on both your mobility and your strength stat. So if you're not in a position where you're able to get a dodge off on an enemy, or you're not near your teammates, say you guys get split in a GM, which is common. There are times like GMs like, for example, Glassway, where you're going to be right on your teammates in that little room for the majority of the fight. So when you smoke both of your teammates, you get your smoke grenade back immediately. In situations like that, Omnioculus is the play over 6 Coyote. But it also relies on a stat line where you need to spec in into strength more, because if you're not near your teammates and say you miss a smoke on one of your teammates and you're not near an enemy to dodge on necessarily, this becomes less useful. Using this in Masters over the last week or two, I don't really notice the damage resist too much. I don't know what damage resist percentage it is exactly. It seems minor. Have you noticed that the Omnioculus perk only procs sometimes? It seems really inconsistent. Yes. This is the other thing I was going to note. The actual subclass reads, if you smoke yourself, you get grenade damage or you dodge on an enemy. But the Omnioculus perk, from what Poseidon said, I was noticing too. So like when we were holding down the war sat in the master this week, one of the things that I noticed in Fallen Saber is like I would smoke my teammates, and if I did it again within like 5 seconds or so to try and build Heart of the Pack stacks, I wouldn't get my smoke back a second time. So I think there's actually a cooldown on how fast you can do that and actually get your smoke back, which makes sense because technically, like if they didn't have a cooldown on that ability, you would have ×3 Heart of the Pack all the time because you would just invis your teammates, full smoke back, invis your teammates, full smoke back. As Console said earlier in chat, do Omnioculus and 6 Coyote give equal invis time? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They are the same. They're just different ways. So one gives 2 smokes, one gives 2 dodges. There's upsides and downsides. It's absolutely S tier. It's insane. You get damage resist for you and your teammates. You get your smoke back if you invis all 3 of you. You get 2 smokes, which is insanely meta because bottom tree tether is very, very strong, not only for DPS on bosses, but you're going to be your special ammo provider for your team. You can solo play. This is why I've started to convert to a hunter main, especially with the amount of GMs I play. A lot of time I end up playing hunter in the most brutal GM. So like Glassway, I was a hunter. Scarlet Keep, I was a hunter. Garden World, I was a hunter. Corrupted, I played hunter. When I was doing double helps on those, or even like single helps, like sometimes my teammates would go down. If I didn't have the invis, we were pretty much screwed. So very strong exotic for both solo and team play. However, I think if you're going off of solo play, 6 Coyote is going to be S tier as well and will actually surpass Omnioculus in terms of solo play because dodges come back within 11 seconds. So you're able to source out a smoke much easier than with Omnioculus. If you miss a smoke, for example, you only have 1 dodge, but with this, you have dodges up all the time. So you can dodge around a wall, and I think the play in general, like the gameplay loop with 6 Coyote is a little easier. I think Omnioculus beats 6 Coyote just barely, but if you're looking for solo play, 6 Coyote is better. Now, how are we feeling about the list overall, chat, now that we have all of them listed out? Worm should be B in your opinion? I don't think so. Honestly, I'm pretty set on these 5. Are there any here that you would move up or down in A tier? I don't know, dude. Generally, these 2 are always going to be good. These 3 are always going to be good on their own because of the way the subclass works and how the exotic works with the subclass. Whereas some of these are dependent on the GM and the artifact mods. I think Assassin's Cowl is very, very strong. I think Aeons are very strong. And same with Frosties, but I think they're A tier because they depend on a specific subclass that isn't necessarily the most meta. They also rely on specific artifact mods to be insanely strong. I think this was a good discussion though. Are we feeling comfortable with all 3 of these? What do we think, chat? I feel like we've got these in a good spot though. This was really fun to do, actually. I really enjoyed this.